So the question we have today is, how do I confirm if the business I plan to build is realistic or just wishful thinking? And how do I create the ideal, profitable business? There's a lot inside this question. What I mean by that is there is a lot of worldview and way of seeing life and business inside this question. So I'm going to break it down, what I see, and then speak to each part of it. The answer is not going to be an answer to the question, because the question itself gives away the obstacles. The question is the problem. And when I say that, the question is an expression of ways of thinking and ideas that are actually the obstacles. So let's break down the question. Let me respond to the pieces in it that I see that are creating the problem in the first place. How do I confirm if the business I plan to build is realistic or just wishful thinking? So the first thing is, how do I confirm? Wanting confirmation before action, before embarking, before committing completely to the task of creating a business that's profitable. Wanting confirmation first, that is the obstacle. Seeking how to confirm comes from wanting confirmation in advance that it will work. There's nobody that succeeds in business because they had confirmation before they went. My mentor said to me once that he had a client who was an investor in businesses, and that investor said he would never invest in an entrepreneur who hasn't bankrupted twice, because it's the willingness to fail that actually creates the capacity to generate powerful results. And so wanting confirmation before going is a problem. So the thing to do is not to seek an answer to how do I confirm. The thing to do is to rid the desire for confirmation from you. And so what you want to actually look for is, what is it in me that wants confirmation before I go? There's something that I'm afraid of happening and that I'm not willing to allow to happen. So unless I know with absolute certainty that this will happen in the future, I'm not moving and I'm not budging forward. Or if I do, I'm going to do it dragging my feet, thus being ineffective, thus be more likely to fail. Business and creation is about living in the unconfirmable, living in uncertainty, and not because you've mustered up this ability in you to just weather that storm of discomfort. You actually embrace it. People go traveling around the world without a plan because they're excited for the uncertainty. The not knowing is the reason they go. They're not stomaching it, they're thriving on it. Anxiety and excitement are the same internal experience with different meaning applied to it. So my first suggestion would be to look at what it is that you are seeking confirmation for deep down in you, and to get that moved out. And here in the creating community is a great place to be supported in doing that, to create yourself as somebody who does not need confirmation. Come to the next class we're doing, where I'll be talking about how we use our speaking and thinking to actually generate a state of being and apply that. Become somebody who doesn't need confirmation. The next part of the question, how do I confirm if the business I plan to build is realistic or just wishful thinking? Away on the word plan here. Why is that? If you had a map, a plan that took you through a forest, and in the forest somewhere was buried treasure, millions of dollars in gold coins, and you went into the forest and you followed the map along the path, and you took a turn to the right when it said to turn right, and at the next tree it said to turn left, and you turn left, and you get to the next intersection and you look at the map and you say, wait a minute, this map doesn't match the road. Would you say, this plan isn't working, so let me turn around now and go back and give up? Or would you put the plan in your pocket, pick one of the choices and keep going, because you know there's gold out there if you would just stick with it and explore and figure it out and get there? I'm not saying don't have plans, but what I'm saying is, when you make your plan your God, you get to a point where the plan doesn't match up, you give up and you turn around. Your God needs to be your commitment to getting to the treasure wherever it is. Be willing to throw out your plan and figure it out as you go. So, how do I confirm if the plan to build this business is realistic or wishful thinking? Well, forget about the plan. Have a plan, but be willing to adjust it, update it, Okay, that didn't work, so let me just take my pen to my map here. There's not actually that turn. Let me update this for the next person maybe, but I'll keep it in case there's something up there that's useful, but it's not about the plan. The plan should serve you. You should not serve the plan. Let's move on. How do I confirm if the business I plan to build is realistic or just wishful thinking? Okay, how do I know it's realistic? This idea that I have, this business that I want to do, how do I know it's realistic? Wanting to do something realistic as a way of creating success or having your outcome is another version of wanting to know in advance that this is a safe route and a certain route towards something. Now, as I say this, I'm not also suggesting that you just go out there total chaos, you don't look to anything, you don't learn to anything. What I'm seeing is the desire for certainty that is becoming an obstacle to commitment and to action. And even if you're taking action, the quality of your action cannot be what it's possible of being when you are distracting yourself with wanting to know whether or not this is absolutely going to work or not. Is this realistic? That's one part of it. The other thing about realistic is based on other people's opinions as to how effective this is going to be. You know, where do you get the term realistic from other than other people thinking that that's realistic? It's like a collective opinion about a possibility or about something. And that is the world that most people live in. Getting a job is a realistic path to income because a collection of people say that's a good thing to do. That's realistic. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur and create your own reality, especially one that's doing it from love and from joy in the way that you want to do it, then you actually want to be an unrealistic person. To be realistic is say, how do I do it like everybody else is doing it? That's not actually what you want, probably, if you're out there being an entrepreneur. I'm much more interested in how if I were to ask this question and keeping all the other frames in place, which I wouldn't have, but if I did, I would say, how do I confirm if the business I plan to build is unrealistic, as in that's a good thing? I want my expression to be different. My friend Mark calls people who are naysayers to his entrepreneurial path to be reverse role models. I want the person that's stuck in a job and can only see employment as realistic to tell me I'm being unrealistic, or else I'm screwed because I'm more likely to end up in their position, because if I do what they think is realistic, I'm adopting their reality, and that istic becomes my istic. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. How do I confirm if the business I plan to build is realistic or just wishful thinking? First of all, we've got this dichotomy between realistic, which we're throwing out, but imagine that was the good thing, or wishful thinking. And so there's nowhere in between. I'm either doing the right thing or I'm just caught up in illusion. The dichotomy is false because there's a whole bunch of places you could be besides one of those two spots. But let's look at the spot called wishful thinking as well. What is wishful thinking? I think wishful thinking is like hope. It's an acquiescence of personal responsibility. It's an abdication of your power. To wish is to react to fear. I don't like this and I'm going to wish something's different. I'm going to create incongruity and incoherence between my speaking and what's actually going on in my body. And so a very important thing is to be congruent. And so to know whether or not you're thinking wishfully, slow down. Be still. If you speak affirmations and you feel shittier afterwards, it's because the affirmation that you're speaking is wishful thinking. There's a gap between the words you're using and what's actually true for you. There's a woman who wrote the book, what's the book called? The Artist's Way. I can't remember her name right now, but she has this thing called blurts. When you speak a positive affirmation, if in the back of your mind you hear something blurt out, no, it's not true, I'm beautiful, no, you're ugly. Oh, that blurt, write that down, journal that, capture that, because that deeper, more subtle voice, the one that's arguing against the wish, that's the voice that's driving you. So how do I know if something's wishful thinking? Well, when I'm thinking something, is there a more subtle voice that's arguing with it? If there is, there's an internal conflict between your conscious, intentional voice and your subconscious voice that's driving you. And as long as that conflict is going on, it's zapping your energy, it's undermining your power, it's slowing you down, it's making you less effective. And you need to create coherence there. Again, here in the creating community in Creators class, we'll be talking specifically about how to bring coherence there so that your speaking creates you and your thinking is not wishful, but genuinely generative of your state of being and of your world. So, the second question, the follow-up question. How do I create the ideal profitable business. How do I create the ideal profitable business? An ideal business is also a trap, because the idea that you can have something ideal, what is an ideal? It's like the ultimate perfect version of something. And so it's kind of like saying, how do I create the perfect profitable business? And I think as soon as I make that correlation between ideal and perfect, you can probably already start to see how that's a toxic frame to come from. Now, you could even say, well, not perfect in the general sense, but perfect for me, like my ideal. I'm actually going to challenge that having ideals, even personal ideals, sets up personal internal conflict, because you can't actually ever reach your own ideals. That's not to say that you shouldn't have values and that you can't have a vision and project something, but when you start to call it an ideal, that actually puts the concept of perfection and absolutism around it, which makes it impossible for you to reach. So I would just soften it. And how do I create my idea, the idea of a business that I want? It's softer. It can still encase all of the ideas that were in your ideal, but hold it gently, relax around it. Let it evolve and emerge. What is ideal for you today won't be ideal for you by the time you get there anyway. And so if you got what you wanted ideally now, which you can't really do because it's perfect, but if you did, you wouldn't be happy with it. So you actually want to relax and let what your ideas of the business you want dance with the unfolding of what happens, and that idea will evolve and change over time as it grows and as you experience it in the world. How do I create the ideal profitable business? Now, this is a great one. The word profitable, I think, can mean different things to different people. I think if you're using the word profitable, that's a great clue that you get the distinction, but let me just make sure that it's there. There's a difference between a business that makes money and a business that's profitable. I've met plenty of people with businesses that bring in 7 figures that profit very little, meaning very little of that money actually ends up for them personally in their life. And I've met plenty of people whose business brings in a modest amount of money, but most of that money becomes theirs and they have a lot of money for their life. And so a business that's profitable means that the business doesn't just make money, but it's able to provide for you and your family and the things that you want. And here's a tip on how to make a profitable business. It comes from the idea that if you're not giving money to people now when you don't have much money, then when you're really wealthy, you still probably won't give money to people. So the habit and the behavior doesn't change once you have money, and it works the same way with profit. And so if you want your business to be profitable later, when it's got a high revenue, then make it profitable now when the first dollar comes in. If you literally make your first sale and it's $1, take 5 cents and put it in a jar. And take 5% of every dollar that comes in from day one. And as time grows, you will already have a 5% profit. And if you're considering your own pay in there, like whatever you're going to pay yourself, take it from the beginning. Actually make it profitable first. And I learned this concept. It's pretty simple, but Mike Michalowicz in his book, Profit First, which is great. There are some non-answers to your questions that I hope give you a different way of thinking that would be even more helpful than a solution to these problems, because these problems were actually the problem. I love you so much for asking these questions, for sharing them with me, for listening, for receiving, for trusting in the creating process and the creating perspective as a path for you to create everything you want. Please stay engaged, both you and everybody else who are watching. And if you're not part of the creating community already, I really encourage you to get in here with us and join the classes and the conversation and learn the creating perspective. You can have anything you want, and you can get it, create it, through doing only what you want to do. I am John Patrick Morgan. I love you so much for being here. Talk to you soon.